to share with you today was a little bit, you saw on our welcome slide Lynn Sylvia, and Lynn has been coming here. How many years has it been, Lynn? She doesn't know. It means it's a long time. It probably goes back to about 20 years.
Well, Debbie was in sophomore in high school.
Yeah, so maybe about 20 years. And last week, Lynn showed me her little dog, and she presented me with a poem that she wrote about her dog, whose name is Fiesta. And that kind of sums up the reality of life that we've been sharing here. And I wanted to share Lynn's poem about Fiesta here with you. And the title of the poem is, "Who Are You Really to My Dog Fiesta?" So let's take a look. She says, "Who's behind those eyes that are looking at me? If it isn't Fiesta, who else might it be? I know there's a photon that lives inside you who guides and directs you in all that you do. When I look in your eyes and you look back at me, I know that it's Photon who I really see." Isn't that nice? And it is very good. And it, I've been sharing with you for some time now interpretations of reality from my perspective. Basically, what is reality? What is real? Can we understand beyond the physical realm the reality of life and how all versions of it interact? Listen, let me just interrupt for a minute. You're going to have to kind of keep me, somebody timing this thing, because I bought this watch. You won't believe this. No, wait a minute. I bought this watch 3 years ago, and it stopped running today. And it cost $10. So I was wondering if I could bring it back. I don't think so. But anyhow, so let me know when we get to that hour point. Lynn's poem is a testimony to the fact that she understands that when she looks into this little body and looks into the eyes, there's a communication with something or somebody else other than that little dog. Now, this is something that's really hard for people to understand. Within the animals that we bring into our homes, something occurs that may not necessarily be apparent when they roam outside. I mean, you can have a dog or a cat running down the street outside. That's all right. Just tell me when it gets there. Okay.
You're not going to exchange watches, though.
Albert, here, you get... here you go, Albert gets this one. Oh. Okay, I'll leave that right here. So I guess we started about a quarter after. Okay. So within the animals, when we bring an animal into our home as a pet, something happens, something occurs that is not necessarily apparent to us when they roam on their own outside. I mean, the dogs go off and whatever they do, and the cats, and we don't, it's another world. We don't have anything to do with that. But there is, just as Lynn has pointed out, there is a type of person. And I'm going to use that word because, I'm talking about consciousness, And I think it's fair, even in a dog's body or a cat's body or a flea's body, there's some kind of consciousness that we can't totally understand at all. It's there. It has to be there, or there could be no life. Okay? So there is a person within that little dog that we're looking at here. You look at this, say, oh, it's a little dog. But there is inside of that some type of consciousness that operates that. See? Lynn has described this, and she was able to connect it with her little dog, but it's also a connection to a photon which is within each of us. See? Now what happens here is that when the dog runs wild, they're out and they do dog things, or the cat goes out and does cat things, or whatever they do, it's beyond our realm. It's a whole different world to us. We don't understand it. But when they come into our house, something connects between us and the animal, and a spiritual relationship develops. Their intelligence on a physical plane is not comparable to our intelligence on a physical plane. Generally, I mean, if you drop something, the dog's not going to pick it up or whatever. But there's something more than that that does develop, and it's not in the physical realm, it's in the spiritual realm. It's in that invisible realm that something goes on, and that's what Lynn is referring to. See? Now, they have that relationship out on the streets in the wild, but it is a relationship that is not overly love-based, but actually survival-based. But when they accommodate themselves to us, and we accommodate ourselves to them, then a whole new relationship develops. Not between the human body and the cat or the dog, but between the photon person which exists within the human body and the photon person which exists within the dog or the cat. Something sets up. Some kind of a contact is made which is above and beyond the physical and becomes a spiritual relationship. So a bonding occurs that is born out of a natural function that we call love. I mean, the most misunderstood word in the world, but what it is really is a need to assist one another and try to bring happiness to one another. And so we have that going on from the pet inside of our house to us and from us back. Now, the cat Oscar in Rhode Island, who knows when people are going to die and lies with them until they pass over, is a perfect example. This is Oscar, and this is, we've talked about Oscar week after week. Now, this cat in the wild would function as a roaming cat, and you'd drive by and see it jumping in a garbage can or jumping out or running down an alley or something. But the person inside of that cat would be totally unfulfilled from a perspective of, from a human perspective. I mean, let me put it that way. No one that would be driving by the street and saw this cat walking down the street or going into the woods would ever have any idea that the photon person inside of that body was someone endowed with a special spiritual gift. You would have no idea of that. I mean, it's just a cat. And it's walking across the street or chasing something. It's just a cat. See? But what happens is when nature or God's program happened in this particular instance, the cat found itself adopted by a nursing home, and suddenly the photon person within was fulfilled in what its true purpose and real meaning was. So no longer does that cat lie on a porch or roam through the alleys looking for cat things. Instead, it makes rounds like a doctor in a nursing home. See? And we've talked about this over and over. But this cat, goes around and checks each person to be sure that he is there to bring comfort and companionship when that person is ready to pass on. So it changes our whole understanding of the higher element in life. Out in the wild, what that cat would do, we have no idea. Who he would communicate with, but here in this particular situation, his life form is elevated to a tremendous level, which goes beyond the abilities of ministers, priests, popes, or whomever to duplicate. He has a special gift, a special spiritual gift. See? So we have a whole different understanding of that cat because it's being fulfilled in a way that's assisting human beings. See? So we have to change our thinking about the element inside of these things. And I mean by that, we have to address this question, which has been answered 1,000 times by the religious people. Is a human life of greater importance than animal life? Well, religion jumps up and screams, of course it is. But what about an animal that is given by God the ability to take us humans by the hand, if you would, and guide us to a spiritual realm beyond the physical? Wonder if that being inside of there has an ability to guide people departing their bodies into this spiritual heavenly state, and no human has that ability. Would that then make that animal of more value than a human being? In other words, if you knew that was a fact and you were about to pass on, who would you want? Somebody in there with a robe on mumbling? Or that cat that knew what it was doing? See? All things become relevant then to what's going on. There's no human that's capable of doing what that cat does. See? And so doesn't this ability mean that the cat pictured here is of a higher element of life form than a human? Or because it can't watch, it can't turn the radio on, or it can't cook a steak or whatever, does that make any difference? Because it can't drive a car? But the spiritual things that are the most important things to our eternal life, it knows, and it deals with that. So basically then what I'm talking about is the joining together of two life elements, the human photon and the animal photon that Lynn referred to in the picture of her dog. And when they come together, when that animal, whatever it may be, comes together and transcends its life from other animals to humans, nature sets up a whole new element that's generated not on the necessity to have things or to compete or to outdo one another, which is a human element, but on the other hand, the animal-human element is born totally out of the need to love, protect, be loyal to one another, regardless of the circumstances. And so, this is why so many people, when an animal dies, they become, so distraught, more so in many instances than when a person dies. Because there is a bond that develops there which is unearthly. Okay? It's not found in many human-to-human relationships. Joan and I notice such a change occurred in the life of the dog we adopted from the shelter, Sage. He went from being a dog to being a family person who is totally filled with love and commitment to family, not simply to receive, but to give of himself in every way. He has adapted and become like a human being almost, to the extent that he is there with us and watches, and it's a whole different thing from the type of animal he was before, when he was running away from everybody and being mistreated and in a cage and all of that stuff. Something happened, and his life could not be fulfilled until now. And that's him. He just, that's what he is. He's just like there, is everything okay? What's going on? And, where's my mother? And he runs all over looking for John. But you see, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Everybody, but what I'm saying is the key to a relationship such as that is two photon people suddenly coming together and exhibiting a love to one another. One in a suit, an animal, a dog, the other in a suit, an animal, a human being. And that's the admonition that Jesus gives to the world when he said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another." That's all that dog knows now. So that's the only thing that concerns him in his life is love. So, and it's not a feeling that comes from attempts on the part of those involved to construct this love. All right? It isn't. It's something that happens when two photon beings accept one another and grow to know one another. And that knowledge, and that acceptance develops into something much more than the commercial love spawned by the movies or the misunderstood love spawned by religion. This is a Kundalini type love. You've heard that expression, that Eastern expression. It explodes within the photon elements of each being, and it transforms those who come into the relationships into beings that they were not before. That dog that you're looking at there is a being totally different than what it was before. And his whole life's goal and desires are completely different than they were before. So there is something that Lynn hit on when she addressed the photon inside of her little dog, Fiesta. The photon person inside of each physical body is suddenly fulfilled, and as a result is capable of doing and living in ways that are uplifting to one another, and doing and living in ways they never experienced or knew before. And it is all an interaction between the photon person inside of each body. That's why when Lynn looks into the eyes of her little dog, Fiesta, she sees the real person. She's communing not with human and dog, but photon to photon, something spirit to spirit, soul to soul, if you would. The photon persons within each transcend the physical bodies that are animal and human, and they become one in a spiritual way. So that's not to say, and I want you to kind of understand where I'm coming from. It's not to say that the photon experience is not there when animals interact with each other, but we don't know what goes on. You know what I mean? We have no idea what goes on in the woods or whatever, wherever they sit or whatever they do. We don't know. We hear of stories. Have you heard of the story of the mother cat that rushed back into a burning building and brought all of her kittens out and so forth? Well, we don't understand that type of love or photon or spirit connection because it's animal to animal, say. But when that inner photon person awakens spiritually, meaning us, to the photon person within the animal, then we have a whole new experience. Say, we transcend the human, and suddenly, we're enmeshed in this type of spiritual relationship that has nothing to do with the mundane things that we have to contend with every day that are physical. Of course, in the physical realm, the material intelligence factor is obvious. You're very, very intelligent materially, but not necessarily happy or not necessarily filled with love. And the animal, whether it be sage or this one, is not able to understand in any way much of what we do or much of what we say. But as far as the spiritual factor is concerned, the human and the animal develop a higher spiritual relationship when they are open to exposure to one another. And the key element then is, and I was really impressed by that. The key element is when I saw Lynn's poem, is understanding that this photon person exists within all living beings. It's an electric element that is the operator of the body. In the same way that the photon person operates the body is also like the driver of your car. Out in the parking lot, all the cars are completely useless. I mean, you wouldn't even have a bird sit on them. Who cares about it? It's just a bunch of stuff. But when a living person with a living photon electromagnetic element inside gets in, suddenly the car becomes very intelligent. It can go to New York, it can go to Atlantic City, it can go to Florida, it can go all over the place. It becomes very intelligent. Not because the car is intelligent, it's physical, but because of the consciousness inside of it that is operating it. It's the same thing here, and it is the same thing with the animal kingdom, say. When Oscar the cat jumps on the bed of someone who's dying, he understands the photon nature of what is happening, which is the photon person in that human being laying in that bed is about to leave the body, and he understands that the person can no longer exist within that body. The body is breaking down, and that photon person must leave. It's a totally natural thing. But the cat understands it, and the cat understands when it is about to happen. See? If the body can't support the photon, then the photon person leaves in the same way that you get out of your car, it breaks down. You know, the car breaks down. Oh, you get out, and then you got to call AR or whoever, AAL, whatever, and they come and hook it up and tow it away. And you get in the truck. You don't get in the dead car. And then what happens? They come and they take the car to the graveyard or the junkyard. And there's nothing in it. They don't take the person. They don't say, hey, you got to get in the car. We're taking it to the junkyard. Both are broken down physical elements devoid of all life. The human body in the graveyard, the car in the junkyard, they're equally nothing. Anything that is of value has gone as far as life is concerned. It's not there. And you can go, and I know it's romantic and it's emotional, you put flowers and all of that stuff, but there's nothing there. Nobody there. You leave the car and the undertaker, and in this case the undertaker is the wrecker truck, and he hauls the lifeless body off to the car graveyard. So when we communicate with another person, okay, we are not communicating with that person's body. That is an illusion. We think that the person's body is the person, and that's not so. That person's body is just a vehicle to use for a period of time in the three-dimensional physical realm. And this is where we find ourselves confused about things such as parallel universes. We tend to think of the cosmos out there, you know, the existence of other galaxies, and that we have to fly off when we leave the body. The parallel universe doesn't mean that. It's like this thing of the rapture in Christianity. These people actually believe that it would be in their interest to have a convertible car so that when it happens, they could put the top down and fly out physically. It doesn't mean that. It's an ascension of consciousness. It all happens in this invisible subatomic realm. It doesn't happen in the physical realm. Physical bodies have no part in that. The parallel universe may be just inches away from us. It might be that close. And all of the people that we have known and loved here who have died physically may simply be inches away. But we become so out of touch with reality because the superstitions of religion, which we're raised in, we don't understand these things. You know, one of the questions that we had when I was a kid was, do dogs and cats go to heaven? Well, of course not, because you know, we don't. They don't have a soul. What's for humans? Okay. Well, you know something. We ask if dogs and cats go to heaven. You know what? You've all wondered about that, don't you? But have you noticed you never ask if lions and tigers or elephants and pigs or mosquitoes go to heaven? You don't care because you don't have any spiritual interaction with any of them. You know? You see a big lion, you don't care if they go to heaven. But your pussycat, your puppy dog, Fiesta, you got to know. Okay? Religious people are stunned by such a question. An animal doesn't have a soul. Take a look and tell me it I can see their little wings and they're up there in the cloud. Certainly. Oh, no, that can't be. That's reserved for us humans. Animals have no place up there with their little wings. That's a sacrilege. But you know what? This nonsense is based on the religious belief that heaven is a place where people go to live in mansions and are just joyful to look at God all day. Let me just express myself, my opinion. There is no such place. It doesn't exist. Heaven is a state of consciousness. It is a living, conscious state of peace and love and joy, of understanding, of helping. And that's what heaven is. Sometimes we all live in heaven, and sometimes we all live in hell. What happens to the body, both animal and human, is that when the body can no longer support that electrophoton person, the photon person inside leaves. They get out of the body. Every single one of your relatives that you knew who passed away and you went to the funeral parlor and you cried and all that simply got out of the body and are in a parallel existence. Whether it's human, whether it's an elephant, or whether it's a flea. Oh, we're not saying fleas go to heaven, do you? But a flea. One of the most interesting things I like to do, and I know I do things differently than other people do, but looking at something as tiny, these little, the smaller the better, these little tiny insects. But I'll see it go, and then it'll make a left turn, and then it's turning. It's going. It's looking for something. There's something in there that isn't an intelligence that I'm not aware of some kind. Something made it make a left turn. It had to say in some way, and here it's as small as a period at the end of a sentence, and it had to say in some way, I think I'll turn left. Better sit because of TV. Okay. So it's really an interesting situation. The photon person inside of each living thing is what we call the soul. And when a Christian says, and I don't pick on them, a religious person says, well, no, the animals don't have a soul. The reason they say that is because they don't understand the definition of what the word soul means. And the soul is thought to incorporate the inner essence of each living being and be the true basis for sapience or sapience. Okay. Now the word sapience, usually defined as wisdom or discernment, is the ability of an organism or entity to act with judgment. Judgment is a mental facility that is a particular form of intelligence. Here is how you'll know. Okay. If a fly is sitting on your desk or whatever it is, and you raise your hand, that fly judges something is about to happen and I'm getting out of here, and it takes off. It has the ability to act with judgment, which means that it is carrying within it a soul. See? And that's what soul is. Soul is inside of the living being. It does what it has to do and what it's programmed to do, what it should and knows that it must do. Whether you see the elephant's burial ground or the way these animals do things that we don't know about, or the birds fly here or the butterfly, whatever it is, they all have something inside of them that says that they do these things, and their judgment carries them away. So they have a soul. A misunderstanding of this is that most religious people think that the soul is something built inside, and every time you screw up, somebody writes on a blackboard in there and says, I went to Atlantic City, we did this, sex, and and it's all this writing. Well, that's not what it is. It's simply the electro field inside of a body that operates the body and is able then to make judgment and do things intelligently, basically. So for the sake of discussion, let's take the dog or the cat or the ant, the inner essence of each living being. Here's a good one, Albert. Now, based on this definition of the soul, that something is able to make a judgment and something then is able to have understanding of something. I watch an ant outside, and I see the ant will be walking, and it somehow sees a crumb. It goes over to the crumb, judges that it can pick it up. It does. The little ant's got this big thing, and then it goes back to the hole and carries it back. So there is some kind of an intelligence inside of this minuscule little thing. It has a soul. Okay? Something has to be inside of that body. The inner essence in that ant knew, hey, that's food that I should bring back to the camp. It has to take it back to its colony. It knows where the colony is camped. It takes the crumb. It turns around. It goes in the right direction, follows the trail back down. In other words, there was a judgment. It could pick up the crumb, and the intelligence that it knew that it had to take it back to the colony. It has a soul. See, the only reason that we look down upon it is because it is an element of life foreign to us. See? When we get into religion and say, if you're not a human being, you don't exist. Anything else you can step on, see? That is the nature of the soul, the inner essence active within a body, the true basis for wisdom and judgment. So all living things, elephants, fleas, whatever they have to have a soul because they are material bodies that are alive, which means they have within them a non-material form of intelligence. Now, is there a form of heaven available for a flea? Does fleas go to heaven? Can you imagine nothing but fleas in heaven? Yes! Because where is heaven for a flea? A dog with long hair. The flea says, I'm in heaven. Heaven, I'm in heaven. Yes, because I found a dog with long hair. What is heaven for a mosquito? Well, you're sitting in your flabby arm there is poised, ready. Suck it up, bud. This is great. I'm having a drink. This is heaven. This is the best one I've had all day. I'm in heaven. So heaven for your dog and cat in your house is being with you and sharing their spirit with your spirit, their photon with your photon. That is the nature of heaven that religion has totally missed. They think it's someplace to attain after you die instead of realizing that it's something to attain while you're alive, wherever you're alive. And the critical matter is that when the body dies, whether it be animal or human, the photon person within it leaves and goes on to another. It moves in a parallel realm where all life continues. Now let's see if we can get back to that parallel universe concept in what we're talking about today. And once again, we're not talking about superstitions such as religion. And that is what that is. That's superstition. We're talking about reality. What's real? And I don't care who may say about an ant having a soul, but you can read about the intelligence that goes on within a colony of these things, and you have all seen these little things doing things like picking up crumbs and so forth. The reality, excuse me, of parallel universes where living beings exist, in fact, where you and I also exist. The quantum reality of a parallel universe is based, among other things, the fact that each atom has a twin. And Albert, we have a scientist who sits in the front row here. He's worked in his life. He will tell you that an atom has the capability of being in two places at the same time. It's the way it is. See? One atom in two places at the same time. It could be one atom on this side of the street and one atom on that side of the street, and they're the same one. So you don't know about that. So that means that since you're atom, you have the same capacity, being two places at the same time, here and in the parallel universe. If you touch one atom here, it immediately affects its other self on the opposite side of the universe in such a way that the other self will move in the opposite way of the one here. That's what the quantum physicists say. So if you have an atom here, and then on the other side of the universe, skillions of miles away here, you touch this one and push it to the left, this one will go to the right. You push this one to the right, this one will go to the left. That's what they say. And Albert Einstein knew that was a fact, and he says, I quit. They said, what is this? Albert Einstein had trouble with all this. He says, I don't believe that God plays with things with chance. And Niels Bohr looked at him and said, Albert, stop telling God what to do. In other words, if you're riding a bike here going south, in the parallel universe, you'll be riding a bike there going north. Look. There it is. Now, if you'll notice, here's a young lady. She's crossing the street going that way, but in the parallel universe, she's crossing the street coming this way. You know what's the remarkable part about this? Most people, when they hear this, just stare. Because it's bizarre. You were never taught that. Can you imagine if we were all taught this stuff when we were kids in school, and we went to church and we learned about the truth? We'd all know now, but nobody told you this. They made up all of these stories. So it sounds absolutely bizarre. So if the body dies here, he died here, he's born here. It'll spawn off another self. It's just like the atom. It'll spawn off another self in a parallel universe, and the life force goes on in infinity, to infinity. And whether it exists in heaven or hell is dependent on the interrelationship of its existence. What I mean by that is, let's look at something that's going on now. We, meaning our government here in this particular part of the earth, have created a hell and deposited it in Iraq. It has been an absolute horror. The destruction, the killing, children, men, women, absolute horror. We have created a hell because of their relationships with the people who had been their leaders and with the relationships of the people of our leaders. An actual hell has been created there. Come on, you're looking for hell. You want to believe in hell? You go over there and live in a house and have bombs falling in your backyard and all over, and you're cringing with your children under a table, or what's going to happen, and the screams and you found it. You don't have to wait to go there. We bring it to you. Could the hell in New Orleans? The people lived in hell in New Orleans. Well, yes, but that was a natural. Let's stop. Because we allowed hell to come to fruition in New Orleans because our Army Corps of Engineers built a levee like this. In London, they built a levee like that. And you could take all of all of Katrina, and it wouldn't knock this down. But how much did it take to knock it? And this is made in the USA, folks. And so what happened? The people were living there, thinks they were protected, and we created a hell for them. And it was. There's no question about it. Things are observed in the mind. And when they come to fruition, they become physical things. See? So it is observation that brings into existence heaven or hell. Can you imagine who sat at a drawing board one day and concocted the levee? But this levee at one time was a thought in somebody's mind. This is the way we'll make it. And it was made. It was observed inside, it was made, and it created a hell. This also was a thought in someone's mind. And you could say it created a heaven because they cannot have, the storms that would decimate the place like we had down there. So, while everybody goes to church hoping for a chance to go to heaven when they die, they allow and support the creation of hell right here on earth while they're alive. And each person at one time or another has a conflict that rages within their own mind, and it becomes unapparent to them. I want to go to heaven. I was talking with people recently. Oh, I believe you. Oh, Jesus is Lord. Yeah, I want to go. Oh, well, no, I think we should stay and fight in Iraq. What are you saying to me? I want Jesus, the Prince of Peace, to return, but I'm all for starting Armageddon in the Middle East. And that's the logic that defies common sense or common decency. So the only possible avenue left is for the human consciousness to change. The mind must be changed from creating hell to creating heaven. And unfortunately, the participants in the struggle can't change the mind in that direction because they're not acting as individuals, And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is where all this trouble comes from is people act as part of a mob. Yeah, oh yes, when the hundreds go into that room in church, they check their brains at the door, and the head of the mob tells them how they have to believe and what they have to do, and that's what they believe, and that's what they do. They don't dare think as an individual and get up and say, pastor or rabbi or whatever, you're wrong. Can't do that in a mob. They belong to a certain church. They belong to a certain country. And their individual reasoning gives way to the reasoning of mob leadership. My church says this, my country says this, that's the way I'm going to follow it. So the conscious mind of the masses of people has to be changed by an external source. It's not that you say to people, stop supporting the war. You see how hard it is when you have leaders who are just not going to do that because then it'll make them look, oh my God, I was wrong. It is the mind has to be opened to new concept, new ideas. And when that occurs, the human brain begins to see things it could not see before, think things it could not see before. I mean, it's dragged out from under this terrible influence religion and governments pour down into people's minds. We talked about this last time when we discussed people that have schizophrenia, being able to see and talk with people who to us are not there. Have you ever been around anybody talking and there's nobody there? What the heck are they talking about? They even talk to people who are dead. We say it's crazy because the invisible person is not there. But that's not why we say it's crazy. We say it's crazy because we can't see the invisible person. Albert's sitting there talking to somebody. Albert, you got a problem. Ethel has you, you give him any pill? Not that Albert does, I'm teasing. Well, maybe he does, I don't know. But the point being that we don't know. The brain of the schizophrenic is electronically changed, and suddenly they see people in a parallel universe, and they talk with them, and so we decide they must be crazy because we can't see the person they're talking to. But you know what they do? We do each week we go to church praying that we could see those same people. I want to introduce you to a physicist whom we haven't met before. He's got a strange first name. His first name is John Joe. And his name is John Joe McFadden, and we'll show him. John Joe McFadden from the School of Biomedical and Life Sciences at the University of Surrey in the United Kingdom believes our conscious mind could be an electromagnetic field. Now his position is one that opens to us the possibility of a mass mind change being orchestrated on living things by electromagnetic energy from Eta Carina, the seventh angel, or the supernova 1987A, because it considers the conscious mind as an electromagnetic field. And do you know what that means? At that point, death is absolutely impossible because the electromagnetic field does not require a body to exist. You never go to sleep, your body does. Thus, the electromagnetic field, which is your true you, continues on in a parallel universe that you call a dream. Professor McFadden's comments stimulate my thinking and also open us up to the thoughts concerning animals which we discussed earlier. Who is Lynn seeing when she looks into the eyes of her dog Fiesta? She's seeing photon. Where? In the electromagnetic field, which is the true existence of that little dog minus his dog suit. See? How does Oscar the cat in Rhode Island know about people dying and passing over? Because his cat suit is only a covering of his true photon electromagnetic field that is the true person inside of the cat body. How do people whose brains have been changed electronically through schizophrenia see other people who are invisible to us? They're able to enter the realm of photon in a different electromagnetic field, and these things are apparent to them and unapparent to us, so we say they must be crazy. This is what Professor McFadden says. Are our thoughts made of distributed kind of electromagnetic field that permeates space and carries the broadcast signals to the TV or radio? What he is saying is extremely interesting. In other words, he's saying that our thoughts and our mind travel in waves throughout the ether in the same way that television and radio waves travel. Let's go. He says here, consciousness is what makes us human. Language, creativity, emotion, spirituality, logical deduction, mental arithmetic, our sense of fairness, true ethics, are all inconceivable without consciousness. But what's it made of? You see? What is it made of? He's saying that our thoughts could be in a field similar to the transmission of signal. I've said this over and over. This room is filled with stuff, isn't it? Football players are running through here. Singers are in here. Cars are racing around. People are shooting. Everything's going on, and everything's the news, and they're yelling, and they're playing music, and rock bands, and symphonies, and it's all in this room. And we don't know it. We can't see it. I can't touch it. Where's the elephant? Where's the football player? I can't see them. They must not be here, but they are. Because if we had a little television with rabbit ears and plug it in, you'd see them. And if we had a little radio and we put it down here, you'd hear it. And if we had, you all do, you have a cell phone, you could pick it up. And right here, you could talk to somebody in California, and the voice would come through. It comes right through the door, and you don't have to open the door. It comes right through the door, it comes right up here, and right in, you can hear it. See? And he's saying that's what consciousness is. And that's why sometimes, when you're particularly alert, particularly spiritual, you get a sense of something. You know when a phone's going to ring, or you know somebody's going to call, or some of these strange things that happen. What do we need, folks? Do we need drugs, or do we need schizophrenia? What the heck do we need to see this? Because if you don't want either of those, then don't go to church praying to see this stuff. Do you enter the realm of the electromagnetic field when your body sleeps, giving you access to what is going on in another place? Do you enter that field when your body dies and carries you on to a new parallel existence? Now here's what Professor McFadden says when he asks the question, well, what is consciousness made of? This is what he said. Electrical signals are processed in our brain before being transmitted to our body. But where in all this movement of ions and chemicals is consciousness? Scientists can find no region or structure in the brain that specializes in conscious thinking. Consciousness remains a mystery. But here's the key to what he says. Electrical signals are processed in our brain before being transmitted to our body. But Albert, the question would be, where do the electrical signals come from to be processed in the brain? See? The signals are transmitted to the brain from someone somewhere, and then the brain processes them so they can carry out the bodily functions. That is the key to the biblical concepts of heaven, eternal life in heaven or hell. We dwell in an electromagnetic field. That's your home. That's where you live. From there, we operate a body and a brain, and we make decisions and form activities in the same way that we do on a computer. And it will either create a heaven experience of joy and peace or a hell experience of hate and war. So we have to look outside of the physical body for the origin of thoughts that are fed to the brain and that are carried out in the material world. Understanding the nature of the electromagnetic field that McFadden's talking about should give us a greater insight into the reality of parallel universes and other versions of you and me existing in them. And especially in these experiences we have all the time that we call dreams. So then, we are invisible creatures who dwell in the electromagnetic field and operate physical bodies connected to electrical brains. I want to introduce you to somebody interesting. Brilliant mind, was born in 1791, died in 1867, name is Michael Faraday. Michael Faraday was an English chemist, physicist, who contributed significantly to the fields of electromagnetism and electrochemistry. Faraday studied the magnetic field around a conductor carrying a DC electric current and established the basis for the magnetic field concept in physics. Here's a guy born in 1791 who did that, see? So this is Michael Faraday. He brought forth the foundation of knowledge of the electromagnetic field. Now we're discussing the location of consciousness, which really means our true self and where we are, the nature of animal as well as human thought, and the idea that it has to be somewhere separated from the brain in order to transmit to the brain. See? In other words, thoughts that we feel as if we are in the body are kind of an illusion because we are actually outside of the body, feeding it from our dwelling place in the electromagnetic field. Now let us see how this gets biblically interesting based on Michael Faraday's findings. This unification, which was observed by Michael Faraday, extended by James Clerk Maxwell, and partially reformulated by Oliver Heaviside, is one of the triumphs of the 19th century physics. It had far-reaching consequences, one of which was the understanding of the nature of light. As it turns out, what is thought of as light is actually a propagating oscillatory disturbance in the electromagnetic field. An electromagnetic wave. So what comes to us as light is actually oscillatory action in the electromagnetic field. In other words, it's a vibrating disturbance in the electromagnetic field. It shakes it up, and we see it as light. And we are proposing that that is where consciousness, or the self, you and I exist. And here's where we gain biblical support for this premise. We gain biblical support when we look at Numbers 23:19, God is not a man. And then we see here, this then is the message, God is light. So then what we call God is an oscillating or a vibrating essence in the electromagnetic field, the same place where we are. And then here's something else that should seal the deal. God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And so what does that mean? Yes, this thing called light, God, is in the electromagnetic field. We are made in its image. We are in the electromagnetic field. And from there is where we carry out this intrusion into the body and to what we call physical material life. See? So this would apply to all living beings. And thus dogs and cats are consciousness in the electromagnetic field, and thus when we in the electromagnetic field come close to a dog or a cat in the electromagnetic field, there is a relation that develops. It's not a physical, but it's in reality a spiritual relationship. So we bring all of this together. We bring all of this together when we look at Supernova 1987A. We bring all of this together when we look at the seventh angel, Eta Carina.
Thank you for being with us tonight.